Believe it or not, I did a little weekend trip out to Zion with my son. Went hiking in like sub-zero freezing temperatures and came back with this like terrible throat thing and totally lost my voice Sunday night. And I have my board meeting Monday night to deliver my first interim report. I sounded like one of those squeak toys as I was presenting my first interim report. It was the most frustrating thing, like the worst possible time to have your voice go down on you. So fortunately it's coming back, and I did survive the board meeting, and actually all good story for the district, all bad story for the state. So with that, Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead us on this journey through where the state's going and what our first interims are.
Yeah, really good. And everyone, happy holidays, and thanks for pushing us to do a special session as we look into the crystal ball. I'm doing a little presentation right after this on reflections of half the year. One of the things, you guys, before I get started, I always have a little John Maxwell tip for you. He goes back on his calendar for the year. You can start with July and just look at some of your things that you accomplished and all the hard work you did. Pat yourself on the back, maybe send an email to staff saying, hey, back in August, I really appreciated your help. What things stressed you out, and what'd you learn from that? It's a really good thing to do in between Christmas and New Year's. It takes about an hour. And then Yuri was saying office staff, you guys are working next week. If you get a few days without staff around, it's also a really good time to throw things away, replenish your office, put some new paintings up. Okay, we're here today, and I appreciate the panel that's going to also present. We're going to quickly go through how different districts are telling their story, their fiscal story. I also have some other samples of other districts that run the gamut. Again, I think it's going to be extra important in 2023 for you to continue to communicate properly with your community as the governor's announcements come out, right? Things are going to be really moving quickly after January 10th. And it's up to you to really, I would say it's really up to you guys to tell the story, where you guys are at, what you're doing, calm the waters, and especially if you have new board members. So I'm going to quickly go through my PowerPoint here. Uh-oh, I think I am. I always like when you hit, there you go. So just some overall tips as you're telling your story. Remember, you have a ton of people, including maybe yourself, never been through a state deficit. We haven't had one for 10 years. So it's your job to get out there, tell the facts, be positive, be confident in what you're doing, and use that first interim as your base of your communication. Snapshot where you're at, and make sure you emphasize your district priorities, reserves, and your worries. Adults do weird things when there's bad news coming out fiscally. People want to know, do I have a job? What are we going to cut? Do we still get to do that project we talked about? Are we still going to do this? And it's up to you to calm the waters with your superintendent, your board. So I always say, when you do your presentations, make sure not only do you talk about your district fiscal facts, but your state and federal updates, and SSDA can help you with that. You'll see what I did with those. Also, be positive. You guys have gone through an international pandemic. You have a ton of issues you've had to deal with. Make sure you give yourself credit. Like we got this. We're prepared for another issue. Issues at the state and federal level. We knew at some point this was coming, and it's the only thing you can do is prepare your people with good communications and facts. Here's a list of important dates for you to go back on. I think it's another good thing to just kind of backwards map up until like July 1, what you got going on. You guys do this yourself. Most of you guys have this thing. Remember, classified and certificate layoffs are on the 15th this year. That really puts you guys in a bind with your classified, because there's sometimes very unpredictable with federal funding and some other funding, and then the rest of it, okay? So these are just reminders to have these dates. You got to remind your board of these dates too, right? just so they're up to speed. Let's talk about federal real quick. Again, the president's got very lofty and very generous goals for education, but it was not going to happen. Not with a war over in Ukraine and not with the inflation. So they'll be cut back frequently. They are fighting with getting their budget approved. They have till tomorrow, or excuse me, yeah, they have till tomorrow, or there could be another government shutdown. They're really working hard. I think they'll fix that with some deals. The big issue is, just so you guys know, the Republicans want way more money in defense spending, and the Democrats want more money into education and infrastructure. They are very focused on education. A lot of them run education. I think when they get in the big capital, though, they really lean on the economy this year and defense spending. Okay. But no, the LAO report came out. It's on this link. You can look at it. It's their snapshot of what's going on, and we continue to see decreasing revenues month to month. 6 months into the year, you're starting to see that we're going to have some challenges. The good news is we've all put money away, the state's put money away to deal with the shortfall, and I think that we're prepared as we can be as a state, unlike 2006. In 2006, Schwarzenegger was stuck with a budget that was already $10 billion in the hole as he tried to prepare his January budget. So it was a no-win situation. It's why we had those mid-year cuts of 20%. Combined, the number we're seeing now is 41 or 46 billion over the next 3 years. So everyone said they're, and it's going to get worse if inflation, it's just going to keep going down if inflation is not addressed or taken care of. The state is bragging. Assembly, this is from the Assembly, who put out a nice report, and I think I sent it to you guys. If I'm not, let me know. But anyways, they look at all the investments we made. We doubled our per ADA. We did TK. We've launched after school. There's also a lot of one-time money in there. But you guys know we cannot sustain this double-digit revenue increases, and this is what's happened. It's kind of time, right? On the good news, bad news, the initiatives are one time, so they'll cut one-time funding before they get to your base. The bigger problem I see, this is going to be brand new stuff for CDE, for legislators. They have just had, it's been like Santa Claus down there every year. They're going to have to make some tough decisions, and people got elected and they want to do things. Like Barrett said yesterday, the legislators want to get their bills on there, which have money attached to it usually, and we're going to see a lot more no's. A couple more things. Man, Barrett blew me away yesterday, guys. He says he's hearing that COLA could be up to 10% next year, right? So in the governor's budget, you might see something as high as 10% on COLA. I think that could be good news if they fund it. That means you guys then have some percentage money to really deal with other losses you have. But man, negotiating is going to get tough. I think I told you guys last week, LA Unified and Fresno dropped the gauntlet, right? The LA wants 20%, 20% raise, and that's gonna be an issue. You guys are all look like you're either you're facing declining enrollment, or we're seeing higher absenteeism. We're seeing numbers in the low 80s across the state. And that's obviously going to be another thing that's going to cause some issues for you guys. Again, remember, we have a lot of new legislators. Try to touch base with them if you got some newbies there. But you're going to see, I think, across the state, the new legislators trying to make a mark for themselves, and it'll be unpredictable. And then I think you're going to see a ton of educators retire with these big raises, right? That'll get people to go retire quicker. I'd review your staffing and see the impact on that. One important thing for communication to your board, remember the reserve. The reserve, as Yuri says, is there for a rainy day, and it's going to start to sprinkle this year, right? And so you're going to, if you have a reserve, keep reminding your board, that's why you save for a reserve. Reflect on your board norms. I pulled these off. A website from one of the districts. I like a norm where there's confidentiality. When we're talking about student possible layoffs or cuts, confidentiality is very important. And remember, confidentiality is not like fruit. There's no expiration date. You don't talk about what you talked about in closed session. You got to remind your board that.
Tim, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
I spent a little time talking to my board about, we've had a couple of years, probably now almost a third year of like all this one-time funding.
Yeah.
And so our budgets look really healthy. And I spent some time explaining to the board that what drives us crazy as CBOs is the uncertainty of the future of where that money, like how do we continue to fund the things that we're just doing, that we've gotten used to doing, because people get used to it very, very quickly. And when that one-time money starts tapering off, and because our budgets can fluctuate in a small school district 20% with this one-time money, 25%. And so it's a little bit challenging to explain to a board, why do your out years look negative? Well, it's because we don't know what's going to happen with this one-time money and some of the uncertainty with how budgets are funded.
Yep. And that's why I say you got to go back to your board goals. Yuri, you say you do. I think you do a great job of this with your board. You remind them what they have bought into and will stay focused on. But there may not be some new shiny things that boards are going to be able, or staff that's been kind of used to trying some other creative things. They're going to have to go back to the core goals of the district. Good point. Just a couple of little bullets for you. I like, when you talk about your district, be straight up with them. Hey, we're in good financial shape right now. We have good cash flow. We have a good reserve, or we don't, whatever you have. Talk about your bargaining units. How's that relationship? Make sure you're spreading that to the board. And then challenges. If you don't spend that one-time money, you have the potential of having it swept, right? We're seeing ELOP, and now adult ed is on the radar of the LAO because people are not spending that money. So they're talking about possibly cutting it or cutting back on it. And so that's what happens. Remind your board if you're dealing with declining enrollment or student attendance. And, in that background, that minimum wage continues to increase. And I think that's going to be another stressor on you guys. Again, we have a very democratic, pro-union legislation, and I think they're going to continue to push that fourth bullet there. And then you can do some other things, talk about long-term debt, talk about your cash flow, talk about where your reserves at over and over and what that means. And it's a reminder that's not touchable. The reserve is there for, really what to take care of issues within your district. A lot of districts, when they're in the reserves, they actually break down what the reserves are geared for, like maybe a broken elevator or maybe the roof or something. Put that in writing and communicate that. Okay, so I'm going to kind of pass it on from here. I'll send you the rest of this of some other things I suggest, but really, I'll talk about current status, where we're at. I'm going to let the great leaders behind me go next, Yuri. And I do like this quote though. You're going to worry and you're going to have some challenges because things are going to fly quickly, but concentrate on the solutions in your district. And if you don't know what the heck you're doing, call us, right? There's some great talent on here. You're going to see some 3 great CBOs come up next. And so I went before them, so I look a little smarter following them. And then here I put some other interims in there, and you can take a look at what some of the other big districts are doing. So Yuri, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. And we've got 3, I think we have three CBOs should be on here, and they were volunteered by their superintendent. So
Excellent.
You got it.
So let's go in order. Let's start off with Nikki. Nikki, are you on? Yes.
I am.
Excellent. Let's have you start. I think Taylor may have to open up the share with you. Taylor, are you on?
And Nikki, give us a weather report up there. What's the weather? What's the weather like up there?
It's cold. It's cold. We're in single digits up here.
Yuri's in shorts and flip-flops down in Santa Barbara just to rub it in.
Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can share my screen.
Go for it. There you go.
Okay. So basically what I do with my interim reports, I do a little narrative that I attach to the front of the pages that we do. Basically what I see my board do is they just kind of breeze through it pretty quickly, and then they get down to a summary page that I always attach. That just gives me a snapshot of my general fund between the revenues, the expenditures, and they always look at our bottom line. But the one they usually hone in on is my multi-year projections. One thing I like to tell them always is the budget's a living document. It's constantly going to change on us. And these numbers up here change as we go along. As you know, looking at possibly 10% COLA, that's going to change my budget drastically. It's going to make negotiations very interesting for next year. And as far as now, I've sent these off. Hopefully these are now on the shared drive.
I believe they are. I believe they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And then my PowerPoint presentation, I usually just keep it fairly simple. I just go through, see if I can get this to start moving. We had a new board member that was sworn in actually on Tuesday night. So I kind of went over more like the budget basics to start with, what funds we have, that type of stuff. The different tax forms we have that we have to go over. Main thing for us, main source of revenues are, of course, our LCFF, which is this year currently at 60%. Normally it's a lot higher, but with all those one-time federal grants and everything else we have, it's actually down quite a bit. And I go over like our salaries and stuff. We have changes from new hires, people that leave, new positions added, the different timelines we have for our budgets. ADA enrollment, I talked briefly about how we come up with our ADA, what our we're running about 92% as our normal, but these last couple of years have not been normal as far as our percentage of ADA into enrollment. Other main changes that we had a large pavement project this last year, and just kind of go over our multi-year projections for the next year with the board, and again remind them everything just keeps constantly changing. For us, we keep a close watch on our cash because cash is not the same as budget, and trying to make sure they understand that, because you know my budget may say, okay, we've got, let's say $10 million down there. That's not necessarily what we have in cash. Anyone have questions? I know that's kind of quick.
No, Nikki, I think that's great. You know what I really appreciate is that the reminder, especially for basic aid districts. If you're a basic aid district, the difference between the cash and the budget is very much very real, because we don't receive our tax revenue until December. So we have to carry operations for 4 or 5 months before we start seeing any revenue coming in. And so, that's such a key point. I know with ADA districts, it's not all that different, but it's a little different because you're receiving the money. I also really like, Nikki, that you spent the time with the new board members. I have a new board member as well, and I regret not spending a little bit more time just, kind of taking a step back and saying, this is what we do. This is a budget. This is the cycle. There's some very good graphics on the cycle. And I know that I'm going to have to come back and basically spend some time with that board member to do that.
Yeah, I usually like to ask the board members to come and schedule a meeting and meet with me for a good couple hours so I can kind of go over the different things that are in the budget. We have several different grants that have different requirements and things like that.
Yep. Very good. All right, let's see, is Carrie on? Carrie? Let's see, Carrie. All right, how about Heather? Heather, I see you. There you are. You want to jump in, unmute yourself, and jump in and give us a little snapshot of your first interim.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Well, hello from Tehama County. I'm in Corning, And that's just south of Shasta County, not as far up as Modoc. We were only at 35 degrees this morning. So, yep, so sitting pretty good. Can I share my screen?
Yes, go ahead. I think you should be able to.
Okay, I'm going to give that a shot.
There you go.
Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to move that over here. Okay, well, very good. So this is what I do with my board, and I do this I do this 4 times a year, the same type of presentation. I went into a little bit more detail. I did have a brand new board member. And so this is kind of the format that, that I go with. So I first start out with why we do a first interim report. I go over, here's the ed code. This is when we'll do first interim. Here's when we'll do second interim. And then, the bottom line, will we be a positive, qualified, or negative? And I usually jump to the punchline and let them know that we'll be positive, that we'll meet our obligations for this year and the following 2 years. Then I give them the assumptions that I talk to them about the importance of doing a multi-year projection. I think that that's really important so that they're not just looking at the single year, but that we're looking at the next 2 years. And I give them the assumptions as to how I come up with the different figures in the multi-year. So I go over the enrollment and then our funded ADA, and I talk a little bit about what ADA is and the difference between enrollment and ADA, because I think that's sometimes missed. Then I talk about our unduplicated pupil count, because we're so high. I like to talk about how much funding that brings to us and what types of things we do with that. I show our ending fund balance, and I really specify here and a little bit later in the presentation that this is much higher than normal, and we talk about the whys of that and how different this year is compared to past years. I always throw the STRS and PERS rates in there, and even though they look consistent, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that both of them are up about 3% this year over the prior year. And so I think that that's an important thing to point out. And then in our district, our special ed contribution is quite high, and we talk a little bit about that point. I like to show my figures in kind of some graphics. So I show the general fund revenue is $52 million. I think what's really important is for them to see that prior year, it was only $32 million. And so typically we're in a situation where we're about a $28 to $30 million district. So $52 million is a big deal. And then just like Nikki pointed out in her presentation, where typically your LCFF dollars are quite a bit higher, ours are typically closer to about 72, 73%. Because we have so much one-time funding, we're only at 50%. So I point those things out. I like to point out the differences between budget and first interim. So again, I do this report at budget time, and so I think it's important for them to see the differences between budget and first interim in the different categories. And then I discuss the whys behind if there's differences. So for instance, that state, there's quite a bit of difference because in June, we didn't know we were getting a large learning block grant and the arts and music block grant and things like that. So I actually spend a little time on how LCFF is generated. I think that this is important. We also have principals in our audience. We have the union in our audience. We have a lot of different players. And so I go over this and so that they can see that attendance matters. And so our kids are actually funded. We get a bulk of our funding straight from how often the kids come to school. So I talk about that base grant, keeping our class sizes under 24, we get additional funds. And then I talk about the supplemental and concentration funding. And then I go into a little bit more detail because we get so much, how that funding is generated and the different populations of students that generate that funding. And then I talk about the differences in revenue between budget and first interim. So I spell those out. We had an increase in LCFF. That's because we didn't, quite know about the augmentation when we did our And then our attendance, we didn't know that we were going to be able to average 3 years worth of attendance. And so we thought we were going to be stuck with current year or prior year, right? Nobody was quite sure what the attendance game was going to look like. So I do the same on the expenditure side. I show the expenditures broken out. Again, 49 million, that's a large number for us. Typically, we're closer to 30 or 32 million. I also point out that the classified, certificated, classified, and benefits, that typically is a bigger share of the pie chart, and that it's smaller due to the fact that that we have these grants that we're trying to use, not hiring staff, but using kind of some one-time expenses in either capital outlay or supplies and services. And I think that that's a really important point to talk about why we wouldn't hire staff with this one-time money. I do the same with the graphics, showing really not a lot of differences. We were able to hire more classified staff. We have really had a hard time hiring people, but we were able to hire some of the classified staff that we didn't think we were going to be able to bring on. And then obviously the books and supplies are higher, the services, because of those one-time grants. I discussed the expenditure changes, again, just because of the one-time funding. Again, special ed is a really big deal in our district. So I have plotted out from 2009-10 how our contribution from the general fund, how small it used to be and how it's grown, what we project that it will be, how many more students are being identified. We talk about, even though the funding is increasing a little bit in special ed, it's just not enough to cover our special ed expenses. I give them an overview of the the revenue and the expenditures. And then I talk about this at length, because the bottom line is $10.5 million, which again is large, but we have, I really specify the very top item here. Our board has a core value of setting aside 17% of our ending fund balance. That may even seem small for other districts, because we're a little bit larger probably than your average small district, because we're sitting at 2,000 ADA. But it's important for us to maintain those reserves, and I talk about the why. And then I also stress that, some of the bigger districts that are over 2,500, that even though the state mandate is only 3% for them, how important it is to maintain reserves. And then I show all of those restricted items, that is money that's one time, that has very specific allowances. And I like to stress that, the allowable uses piece, because this isn't money that we can just spend on anything we want. I see if they have questions, but that's not the last slide. The next slide is probably the most important slide that I share with our board, and that is the positives. We talk about why it is a great year to be a student in our school district, and so we really take that opportunity to really share the great things that we're doing in our district. So anyway, that's my presentation. I did that presentation Tuesday night. My superintendent volunteered me yesterday afternoon. So there it is again for you for the second time. So any questions at all?
Heather, this is an excellent presentation. Another excellent presentation. I really, you said something at the beginning that I stick by, and that is that I use a format. I like to get my board very used to what I present every budget cycle presentation. It looks very similar. They get used to it. They know when you start pointing things out, they start to see it before you even point it out, because you've trained them as to the information. So I really like that. It's something I stick by. I also like, and I'm a big proponent of this, keep it clean and simple. Don't clutter your slides with a bunch of stuff, because I mean, these are board members that are not accountants. Most of them are not accountants. They're not finance people, or some of them are, but not. There's a lot of lay people. I call them lay people. I mean, people that come from all walks of life that aren't used to working with budgets of this size. And the easier it is for them to understand it, the easier it is for them to have support of all the different projects and programs that you're engaging in. So I really like the fact that your presentation is very clean. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, so much for doing that. And really the idea of doing this is we have a lot of new CBOs that are joining the profession that make these calls. And so the more information that we share amongst each other allows us to basically beg, borrow, and steal, right? I like to give my presentations out to everybody so that if there's something that you like, please take it. At the last meeting, I shared the backup tables that I use, the Excel backup tables that I use to create my presentations, which are all linked together. So you start plugging in the numbers and it populates all the different tables. So, and if anybody wants that, let me know. I'll make sure that it's in the share file. I think Taylor has put it in the share file. Very good. I don't think Carrie is on, so I think we're going to move on. Tim, I think we also have Barrett. Is Barrett joining us today? Barrett, are you there? This is the downside to having 95 participants, right?
Barrett's not joining today.
Barrett's not joining. Okay. I'm not sure if Tim is still on. I know we were going to try to keep this kind of short. Does anybody have any questions for any of the presenters? Very good. Well, this was good. I think this is very helpful. I very much appreciate everybody joining this morning. I think, Taylor, we're picking back up in January, right?
Yep, we're picking back up the second week in January.
Okay.
Check the chat. Carrie doesn't have the Zoom link. She wants to join.
Oh, wonderful. Can we send her the Zoom link?
I am actually on. I just got on.
you
Sorry
got
about
on.
that.
Okay.
I was scrambling this morning.
Carrie, do you have your presentation ready? If you're ready, you can share
Sure.
and give us a brief overview of your first interim. Excellent.
Okay, so I was told that I was just going to be going over a presentation on reserves.
That's perfect. Go for it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm
No worries. You're good.
share screen here.
Taylor, will you make sure Carrie has the share link? There you go.
Yep, she can share screen, but it looks like Heather is still sharing. She might need to steal access from her. Let me see. I might be able to actually maneuver that. Hey, look at that.
Message that my
Okay, we can see your screen now, Carrie.
okay, great.
Perfect.
So just a couple caveats. I actually am the CBO for Wheatland Union High School District, but I was asked to do a presentation on reserves. And so I was at another district a few years ago, and I thought this would be Orland Unified, and I thought this would be a better presentation that I kind of drew from my archives. And the reason is when I came into Orland, they had pretty low reserves. So we did quite a bit of work on trying to convince them of what an appropriate reserve level would be. So that's what I'm going to share today. So when we're looking at reserves, there's a lot of reasons that the state minimum, of course, is never probably enough. And it's always better when you go into a district, if they do have reserves, to do this exercise through a workshop with the board to better help them understand why the state minimum 3 to 5% is just never sufficient for a district to hold in reserve for economic uncertainty. So that's kind of what I'm going to go over today. So we know that whatever the state minimum reserve level is, depending on your enrollment, is probably not sufficient to carry a school district, especially small school districts. And I always use this as an example. It's based on a percentage. With really small school districts, I used to work in Siskiyou County, and we have very small school districts up there. And even though it's based on a percentage, it doesn't really relate. So my example is I worked at a school district that had issues with their boiler systems. They had a couple boilers. I think one was off of a 1940s Navy ship or something. So if you're at a small school district and your boiler goes out, it's a lot different than being at a big school district and your boiler goes out. That's just kind of budget dust for a big school district. So the percentage doesn't really equate. And I think the state kind of recognizes that. And so that's why they've let us determine what our reserve levels should be. And given all of the budget cap caveats in the law right now, and how they've let districts under 2,500 ADA be exempt from that, shows that they really recognize that.
Carrie, can I interrupt you for a second? Can you put your presentation into the presentation mode so that we can see the slides?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure which window that you're seeing here.
Bottom on the bottom right hand, there's a little icon next to where you increase the size of the screen. Or just hit the from beginning button at the top left-hand corner. Under file.
I had a board meeting last night and I have it in presentation mode still. So let me figure this out real quick.
Tell you what, let me keep talking. Go ahead and keep talking, and I'll pull it off. I think we have it in the share folder, right, Taylor? I'll put it up. Think you want to just continue presenting? Or Carrie, sorry.
Sorry, can you see that
Sure.
one?
No, just keep presenting. I'm going to have Taylor, send it to me and I'll put it up on the screen. Just keep presenting. Keep talking.
Okay, I don't think anybody else has it.
Do you want to, okay,
Carrie, could you drop the file into the chat maybe, and then I could present it?
Sure.
just open up the chat and drag the file into the chat.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Thank you for your patience as we go work out a little bit of the technical issues.
Let's see here.
I know, Carrie, I spent a lot of time talking with my board about reserve. I think all of us dread the whole cash flow issue. And I know that when we've talked to the county about the trans, and I don't know if any of you have ever done a trans, but in those, usually when you go into a pool at the end of the year so you can fund operations, the trans are so expensive for a small school district that it's not a realistic option for a small school district. And it creates a little bit of it's a very costly problem to have if you run out of cash. And so that reserve is so absolutely critical for districts.
Yes, I agree. I've only been in a district that had a trans for a period of time. And it's interesting because once you do sign up for trans, they really pester you year after year. So they think it's going to be your norm.
Yeah, and it's a moneymaker for a lot of companies, right? The financial advisors, the underwriters, the investors. So they like you to be in the trans cycle. And it's a really bad thing for a district. The costs are exorbitant to have to borrow that money for operations.
Right.
Some county offices of ed and some counties will actually loan small school districts money, but I've not seen that in the last couple of years. I've not seen a lot of it, that's for sure. So go ahead and talk through your presentation. What we'll do is we'll have Taylor email it out to everybody afterwards so that we all have it.
Okay. Do you want to skip to the next person while I try to figure this out? I'm sorry. I'm having a lot of technical difficulties this morning.
I think you were the last one up. So.
Oh, okay. You know what? I think if I log off and log back on, it will help.
Why don't we do this, Carrie? Well, let's leave your presentation for a future meeting. How about that? Kind of running out of time here. I promised everybody we'd keep it short. What we can do is maybe do it in January. Would you be willing to do that?
Oh, sure. That would be great. Okay. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I was relaying to everybody about my fiasco on Monday when I lost my voice right before having to present my first report. So these things happen. It's not a big deal. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. I think these things, the feedback that I get almost daily now is that they are very helpful, and that the information that we're sharing, that all of you are sharing, has been very beneficial for the jobs that we do every day. So I want to thank you for joining us. I want to wish you all a very happy holiday season, and hopefully, I mean, I know that when I presented on Monday, there was this huge weight lifted off my shoulders because I know, okay, I can breathe now, right? Because I've gotten developer studies done, I've gotten first interim done, I've gotten, the balances in excess of minimum reserves. I've gotten all this stuff out of the way, and I can breathe. And so I know that if you guys can enjoy the holiday season, it's a good time to kind of unwind. And I wish you all a very, very happy holidays, and pop open a nice bottle of champagne or a nice bottle of wine and relax with family. So that's all I have. If anybody wants to stay on and chat, I'll hang out for a few minutes. Otherwise, have a happy holiday.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.